Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Very nice to see you again and to be with you once more. Thank you for your invitation and your hospitality. I'm seeing David, Sasha, Andrea, Yugala Preeti, and Dixon. Is Dixon the right name? Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Very nice to see you here again. Is there someone else here? Susan Resnick and Gorav. I think that's everyone there. All right, so it's an honor to be with you once again. Atmani Vedana Prabhu asked me to speak about the 29th verse of the 3rd chapter of the Gita. So why don't we? I'll read the Sanskrit and then the translation, and the purport is not very long, so we'll read the purport as well. This is Bhagavad-gita chapter 3, text 29. Prakriter guna sambuddha sajjante guna karmasu tan akritsna vido mandan kritsnavin navachalayat. And the translation by Srila Prabhupada says, bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says as follows. He says, persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with gross material consciousness and are full of material desires, designations. This body is a gift of the material nature, and one who is too much attached to the bodily consciousness is called manda, or a lazy person without understanding of spirit soul. Ignorant men think of the body as the self. They accept bodily connections with others as kinsmanship. The land in which the body is obtained is their object of worship, and they consider the formalities of religious rituals to be ends in themselves. Social work, all right, pay attention to this sentence. Social work, nationalism, and altruism are some of the activities for such materially designated persons. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Under the spell of such designations, they are always busy in the material field. For them, spiritual realization is a myth, and so they're not interested. Those who are enlightened in spiritual life, however, should not try to agitate such materially engrossed persons. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. Such bewildered persons may be engaged in such primary moral principles of life as nonviolence and similar materially benevolent work. We're going to come back to that sentence as well. Men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. Now listen to this. Next sentence. But the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. So, okay, interesting. This is why it's a tough job trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita, studying it on your own. It can take you this way when really the intention is that way. For example, if you just take these instructions on face value, it seems like what? What does it strike you? I'd like to hear from you. What does this verse and purport or commentary strike you as saying? What's the essence of it in a sentence or two? Can someone give me a summary of someone coming upon this the first time. Yeah, David, what do you think the impression is reading this kind of cold? Can you unmute? Oh, maybe not. All right, then, well,
Pasha, can you unmute
oh,
David, please?
there we go. Okay.
Okay. First of all, it's great to see you again. I used to take your classes at Jiva, and I recall them very fondly. So at the first glance, it could be read as a critique of behaviors that we would consider to be moral ones.
Yeah, exactly.
And it would be sort of promoting, from a cursory perspective, a kind of immorality.
Well, if not immorality, at least a stepping back away from social work and activity in the world, certainly. I don't think it's promoting immorality, but certainly it's saying, all of that other stuff, the social work and the altruism and materially benevolent work, that's for people other than devotees. Yugala Priti Prabhu, I see your hand.
It strikes me that I usually approach people that I maybe like you think, oh, I shouldn't be even approaching them because I disturb them. And which is true, we do disturb some people. But in the same time, Srila Prabhupada said, devotee do that. And so I feel a little bit better about that. And the fact that, no, that's just that for now.
Yeah, no, you've put your finger on it. I think between your comment and David's comment, we've really hit on the two important themes of this verse and purport here. Namely, one is this overt message or the surface message, which seems to be, leave the material work, however righteous it may be, to the materialists. That's not the devotee's business. And the second comment being, don't disturb them. There's this kind of us and them mentality going on here, So a few things that we should keep in mind here. And that is that, of course, Prabhupada's teachings are timeless. And there's something that I've come to know in my own experience in the last 53 years. Oh my gosh. Practicing Krishna consciousness. And that is that there is a magical quality to Prabhupada's teachings. And while there's a certain kind of lens through which Srila Prabhupada sees things and writes about them, and that lens comes from the experiences of his life, coupled with the transcendental wisdom that he's learned as a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami. We need to get to the essence of his mission to understand how to apply these things properly, because you can understand these things from a number of different perspectives. And let me give you an example. Let's look at the instruction, Paradukkha Dukhi. If you've heard this, are you familiar with this phrase? Paradukkha Dukhi means that a Vaishnav, a devotee of God, is the only unhappiness, the only dukkha, the only distress or sorrow or discomfort for someone who has given his or her life to God is the distress of others. So here's the question. How do we define dukkha? How do we define discomfort, sorrow, distress? Right? If we're not referring to the victims of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, if we're not defining dukkha as the experiences of those who have been left impoverished by war, people who are isolated from food, from drinking water, from proper shelter and medical attention, if we're saying dukkha does not refer to children who are being denied proper protection, who are being denied education, people who are being denied proper legal protections from those who do them or their families harm, If dukkha does not refer to any of that stuff, then we're only left with one definition, aren't we? And dukkha means anyone bereft of love of God, right? And there is no other distress worthy of our consideration except separation from God. And that certainly fits with our theology. I mean, we read this in all the writings of the acharyas and the poetry by the Vaishnava poets and so on, that the greatest distress for a devotee is the separation from the company of the Vaishnavas and so on. Right? To have no love for Krishna. But here's the thing. If that's the case, and if we are constrained even in our definition of dukkha, in our definition of sorrow and discomfort and so on, to feel compassion exclusively for those who lack love of God, those who are bereft of the company of devotees, then the circle of our compassion becomes very restricted, doesn't it? It's basically restricted to who? To ourselves. That's the only application that's left. Right? To those of us who are privileged to have been trained in the worldview of souls separate from God, because the rest of the world doesn't feel that distress. They don't have that discomfort, right? They're not even aware that it exists. You can't treat an imaginary disease. So where would that leave us? All right, well, let me give you an example. Go back to, in your mind, to the events of January 6th of last year. All right, so I have no doubt that among the insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol, there were many true patriots who thought they were acting righteously. No doubt many of them were churchgoers. There were people who looked after their families and their neighbors in time of need. They had come together with like-minded individuals to perpetrate one of the most heinous acts in American history. So in other words, these were people who were fiercely committed to people who thought like them. People acting what they believed was righteously in union, in community with people who believed like them, who were like them. And anyone who was not like them needed to be put down by any means possible. Right? We won't get too deep into the current politics, but you can apply that to what's happening in the world today as well. How would we be different if the only dukkha, the only distress that we're prepared to validate as worthy of our attention is when someone thinks like us and acts like us and does like us? Right? Are we not compelled by the foundational tenets of Chaitanya Vaishnavism to see deeper into the human experience, to become more compassionately attuned to the human condition, so that we are inclusive rather than exclusive in our faith? I remember a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada in London. And I don't know if I've told you this story before, but I couldn't resist. I would ask a lot of impertinent things. So I said, we walked, it was in Hyde Park on a morning walk, and we walked by a tree. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, what does a pure devotee see when he looks at this tree? Right? It was a little impertinent on my part, because what I'm saying is, you're a pure, I was like, So Prabhupada very humbly stepped back away from that and said, well, a pure devotee, meaning not me, but someone who is a pure devotee, looking at this tree, will see not just the body of a tree, but will see that there's a soul that has taken up residence in the body of a tree. And then a pure devotee would not stop there. They would see that in the heart of that soul is the super soul. There's Krishna there. So instead of just seeing a tree, he would actually see Krishna. I have to say that that was it. That was it for me. That solidified my whole faith in Krishna consciousness. Right? The potential contribution of Chaitanya Vaishnavism to a forward progress in humanity by virtue of being inclusive, that devotional service includes everything, done in the proper spirit. There isn't anything outside the scope of devotional service. Right? And frankly, without that, I didn't see what's the point in making an effort to try to be more Krishna conscious. Let Krishna do what he wants. It's all up to him anyway, right? Why should we exercise our initiative in the world? So I believe that approaching these teachings in this verse and in this purport by Srila Prabhupada from a somewhat more broad-minded perspective, what we begin to see is that the social work, the altruism, and benevolent works that Prabhupada seems to be distancing us from here actually take on another meaning when housed within the context of a form of devotional service. The kind of activity he's describing here that we need to distance ourselves from is service that is cut off from bhakti. The same two actions, one performed by someone who has not had the great blessing of a training in devotional life, and the other by one who does everything on behalf of his spiritual master and Krishna, same activities, vastly different results, vastly different outcomes from those similar activities. Let me give you a few examples from verses from the Bhagavad-gita. We're coming up in the 4th chapter on this verse, 18. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent and sees in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Although engaged in all sorts of activities. A little bit later on in the 4th chapter, the work of someone who is unattached to the modes of nature and is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Your activity, even though it may appear to be mundane, merges into transcendence when it's done without material motive and situated in transcendental knowledge. Also, the following verse, a person fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Whatever, madmana, mavabat bhakta, whatever you do, if you do it in that spirit of devotion, then it is not mundane. It is not cut off from the usual definition of devotional service. It is incorporated within that definition. Elsewhere in the Gita, one who performs, this is the 5th chapter, one who performs duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme God, is not affected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So you, in an ideal state of spiritual consciousness, there isn't anything you can't do and remain unaffected by it, and the results are transcendental. What Prabhupada's concerned with here in this commentary is those of us who are on a very beginning platform, a very neophyte platform, who, if we were trying to do these kinds of social activities, we'd forget about our spiritual business and fall down. That's a problem. But he's not saying that being a good person in the world, caring for people who don't have enough food, housing people who have no shelter, sending aid to people who are being bombed out of their homes and hospitals is wrong. He's saying it needs to be undertaken in the spirit of devotion. Right? Listen to this verse. The Blessed Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated and is in the renounced order of life. And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work. It is not spiritual to do nothing. It's cowardice. If you're thinking, oh, I don't want to get involved, I'm going to get attached. That's not spiritual, that's cowardice. That's saying that there are I'll do my service, but as long as I'm comfortable doing it. That's the message there, right? So, we do need to make a distinction between social work, as for example espoused by Swami Vivekananda, who looked down on bhakti as the vestige of some less developed time in India's history. These Chaitanya Vaishnavas, singing and dancing, are a bunch of sentimentalists, and they should do something meaningful, like open hospitals. That's a put down of devotion. He's not saying open hospitals in the spirit of devotion. He's saying forget devotion, just open the hospital. That's what's being condemned here. Or if you go into the history of India's fight for political independence, you have Gandhi and Tilak, who in their translations and commentaries on the Bhagavad-gita saw social action as espoused in the Gita as a tool for India's political independence. Right? So that kind of misappropriation of bhakti, we need to be careful about. Otherwise, the call to engage in the world is embedded in Krishna consciousness. It is embedded there. There might have been a time when to be spiritual meant, I'm out of here. You go to the woods, you go to the forest, you go to the mountain caves, you chant your mantras, and it's all about you and your salvation. Well, those years are long gone, long, long gone. That's not the time we live in now. We live in a time where the world is so interconnected that what we do here affects people halfway around the globe. Your personal behavior, your personal character has an impact on the future of humanity. You cannot talk about spiritual progress if you don't talk about reform of character. It doesn't work. It just does not work. You have to be sensitive to the community around you, to the culture around you, and make a contribution to the progress of that culture and that community, because otherwise you're missing the point. Your spiritual progress is connected to that contribution that you make to the culture around you. That's the time we live in today. And you really cannot avoid that. So I think we need to just keep that in mind. Give you one further example, and this is connected with what we're seeing in the news every day. New York Times, 8-column banner headlines. I haven't seen that since the Kennedy assassination or something. Day after day, full-page headlines. We practice our Krishna consciousness thanks to constitutionally protected freedoms. We have freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. Those things are not available in a lot of countries around the world. They're certainly not available in Soviet Russia, right? Putin's Russia, rather. And I don't think I'm getting too political about this. I'm just stating the facts. It's the obvious facts. If you speak out, you will be imprisoned. It's that simple. In this country, we have an opportunity to express our point of view and to practice our devotional life. It is constitutionally guaranteed, safeguarded. Can we therefore afford, as Chaitanya Vaishnavas, to benefit from those legal privileges and yet remain silent when they are threatened? If someone steps into a position of authority in government, in religion, and abrogates those constitutional privileges, how do we hold our heads up and remain silent about that? I don't see how it's possible. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't hold back. When Chand Kazi was infringing upon the rights of the Vaishnava community to perform Sankirtan, he organized the first mass protest in history. It wasn't the only one, but it was the biggest and it was the longest lasting. Right? when Ravana kidnapped Mother Sita, Ramchandra didn't say, well, I guess it's my karma. You know? No, he rallied an army. He put an army together and fought the Battle of Lanka and brought down the despot. What is, do you know what the next verse is in the Bhagavad-gita after this one? Verse 30. The very next verse. If you want some evidence that what we're talking about actually makes sense, that this is a compulsion not to move away from social action, but to get involved. Next verse. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. It's the very next verse, right? He's saying, he may be saying, the ignorant become attached to material activities. Don't think that excuses you from doing what you think is material. This is the whole message here. Arjuna mistook his social action. I mean, let's face it, the Battle of Kurukshetra was a political war. It wasn't offering arti to the deities. It was a political war. There were despots, we'd call them terrorists today, who took over the throne, and they had to be brought down. Arjuna said, no, I want to be Shanti. I don't want to hurt anybody. Krishna says, you may think like that, but you're acting like an ignorant person. You don't know what's what here. The only thing that's material is your lethargy about getting up and doing what you got to do. The battle is righteous. Now get up and fight. So I do believe that we need to reconsider our participation in the rest of the world. I believe that is critical, especially at a time like this, when we're faced with some unprecedented issues. What do we do? It's challenge. It should be disruptive. It should be challenging you. You should be upset by this, by what you're seeing around you. If you're not upset by what's happening in the world and in this country as well, then I don't think you've actually understood the purport of Krishna consciousness. It's not a turning away from things. It's a going inside those things, getting a clearer picture of what's going on, and then being able to make it a contribution to their improvement according to your abilities and skill sets. Don't pick up weapons and go fighting. You're not Arjuna. That's not your skill set. But still, there's something each of us can do to take part in that greater call to action, which is Chaitanya Vaishnavism. So, why don't we open this up for some discussion? Shall we do that? Let's see. Does anyone have? You're welcome to make any. I mean, you don't have to ask a question. If you have a comment or a thought or an idea, please just unmute yourself. Dixon, is that how you'd like to be called? Dixon?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my first name.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's soon to be initiated. I found out today, Yogesvara Prabhu.
Oh, God.
Another name.
Haribol. So, Dixon Prabhu. Yes, please.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for your insightful commentary on Prabhupada's text. It was very enlightening. I wanted to ask this question. Now, society seems to be going in a direction which they seem to be the right thing to do, right? In this so-called woke and aware of what is going around them, and you're trying to do things that they feel that they are the right way. But as a devotee, when I look at some of the things that they are trying to do to solve the problems of this world, I feel like that is not the right way to do them, right? So, like, based on what you just said, that we should try to contribute to the good of society. When, for instance, if I try to say, give my opinion on something, which I think based on the teachings of the Gita, this is the right way we should go, it will be like you're opposing the status quo or what society deems as right already. So how do we go about trying to reconcile this difference in our effort to contribute to society?
Well, be cautious about something. There's no instruction that says you should try to act above your ability. You know, when we talk about diplomacy, when we talk about negotiations, particularly on the kind of complex levels as what we're seeing today in Russia and Ukraine, you know, there's a very old history there. It goes back more than 100 years in terms of territorial disputes and consequences of the Versailles Treaty, and then the reapportionment of the Balkan nations after World War II. There's a complex history involved there. And so it's not that we're just supposed to go waltzing in with our Bhagavad-gita and say, you know, everyone should chant and chill out. There are subtleties to any situation in this world that are the domain of experts in that particular field. The same is true in medicine and health and wellness. The same is true in areas of poverty. The same is true in environment and ecology. Each of these different areas has its own particular vocabulary, its own very unique challenges. And while they may be interconnected, and they are interconnected, for example, you cannot separate what's happening in Ukraine right now from the energy crisis. There are tangencies across many different areas of issues and themes. And to be able to address these issues and themes effectively requires some serious background in it. I think one of the real mistakes that I've seen happen on occasion is people thinking that because they have some training in bhakti yoga, therefore they can pretty much take part in anything and they'll know what to say and what to do, and that's just not the case. Someone may have some fine words to offer, but you can exacerbate a situation and make it worse if you're not trained in the subtleties of what's happening there. So by offering you the kind of input that I just did, I did not mean to imply that we should just buy tickets to Moscow or something and try to talk sense into the government. It is rather to say that we have an obligation to think very carefully about what we mean by devotional service. There's a verse in I think it might be 12th canto. Arche Vishnu Shaladir Gurushu Naramatir Vaishnave Jati Buddhi. If you're offering service to the deity in the temple, but you are not seeing that same supreme being in the heart of all other living beings, then you are a materialistic devotee. That kind of commentary is there throughout the texts. You know, if you are capable of seeing God in all beings, then whatever your particular sphere is, you can work within that. You know, we may not have the power or the wealth or the influence to have an impact on those grand scales. You know, that's out of our hands for the most part. I mean, I'll share something with you just confidentially. Don't tell anybody, okay? My personal feeling is that we could actually do something there. It has to do with the power of the religious and spiritual leaders of the world to come together with the strength of their respective communities unified and to become a vehicle for what is known as track 2 diplomacy, or diplomacy that takes place behind closed doors. That's my personal conviction. I can't recommend that to anybody. It's not something that I would normally talk about in a Bhagavad-gita class, because it's meant to happen anonymously behind closed doors. You know, that spiritual leaders will be able to act in a capacity of mediator between disputing warring parties. And because both sides will see this person as a person of God, they will have some confidence and a willingness to share certain information with them that they might not even be able to share with their own inner circle, politically or militarily or otherwise. You know, I was in Kyoto, Japan, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago or more, something like that, where there was a meeting of an organization called Religions for Peace. And there were representatives from more than 100 different nations, and they were all talking about interfaith programs. And in rooms on the second floor of this beautiful hotel in Kyoto, there were private, unannounced meetings going on between imams from the Islamic countries and chief rabbis from the state of Israel. Can you imagine? Sitting down together, talking about ways they could reconcile their difference. Nobody in the entire conference knew that those meetings were even taking place, because they were not officially organized. They had been arranged through this backdoor track 2 diplomatic channel that is religious and spiritual leaders. So I do believe that we can have some kind of an impact even on those higher levels of engagement, but that's not for everybody. That has to be approached very, very carefully. You need to have some serious background, years of training in mediation, and you have to be a historian. You have to know what the background is. Otherwise, you're just going to be foolish and you could make things worse. So I believe it can be done, but it has to be done extremely carefully.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Padma.
Krishna, I'm really enjoying your class. So I have, interestingly, it may seem unfair, but if it's okay with you, I'm about to make 4 comments related to your points, indirectly or directly, but I'm going to do them rather quickly, so it won't be like I won't be taking over, promise. So the first one is, hopefully I'll remember them. The first one is Bhakti Sasha's, his mother lived until about a week or so ago in Ukraine. And my wife, Subi, was preaching to Sasha for, I think, a week and a half or so, until she left Kyiv to tell her to leave. And Sasha was, and then Subi and I ganged up on Sasha at the Sunday feast after that. And I think we had a little
Mind
more.
if I just interrupt you for a moment? Sasha, is this okay with you that we're talking about this, or would you rather we didn't?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So the thing is, Hare Krishna. So the thing is, then Sasha convinced his mother to leave, and then I had a video meeting with the two of them and said, please leave today. And then I was surprised she actually did. Now, for me, the import of this was, she's not like a practitioner of Krishna consciousness the way that Sasha is, but I felt like I didn't separate it from a spiritual or material activity. And to me, I was helping a person to get some material shelter. It's someone who I care about, particularly because I care about Sasha. And I felt like this helps her become a devotee somehow as well, because we're devotees and trying to be devotees, and we want her happiness. And I just can't separate the two issues. So connecting spirituality with materiality, which I think is to your point. A second one is I recently gave a large donation because I saw an advertisement how to give a donation to the devotees in Ukraine. And I thought, I don't know what to do with funds that I want to do some kind of charitable work for. And I did that, and it gave me some sense of solace that I'm doing something good once in a while with my life. A third comment is the other day, I was walking home from work, and I walked by former Mayor Giuliani, who I think is an utterly awful person. But when I saw him there with his lady friend, I was extremely happy to see him. And I said, Hare Krishna, and he didn't exactly greet me, but his lady friend had a huge smile, and he nodded at me, and we went for it. And the fourth, because he is an influential leader, and I didn't have any expertise in helping him, but somehow or other, maybe there's some benefit there. And then the fourth experience is my father, who passed away, bless him, to go back to Krishna in September. And he was an utterly charitable person, to the point that I got angry at him sometimes, because whenever we would go to a restaurant, when I would visit, he would give the waiters and waitresses tips of 50% of the bill. And I was telling him, that's not really standard. And he would never stop. So he's a very nice person. And then we had transcendental experiences after his departure to help him, go back to Krishna. And my understanding is he welcomed the opportunity to become a devotee after he passed away. My personal experience, and I feel like his charitable experience, his charitable activities, and his being a genuinely nice human being paved the way for his being a devotee, because it's consistent. And that's it. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for all four of your lovely comments. Andrea?
Hare Krishna, Yogesvara Prabhu. I feel very blessed to be able to be in class with you today. I actually had my husband, who Atma Prabhu was speaking of this morning, had the privilege of hearing you this morning. There was a program through the BI that you spoke to about how to speak to people. And I feel like it's so connected, what he told me about the program, to what you're speaking of today. And when you were speaking, it made me think, I just finished an ISKCON communications course with Anuttama Prabhu. And so much of what you're saying resonates with what he teaches in that course about the importance of, when speaking to others, of having that empathy and that compassion and seeing everybody as a person. And also the importance of having that training. As you're saying, obviously just taking an ISKCON communications course is not enough, but just training ourselves on how to speak to others, how to reach out, and the importance of interfaith work, and how in us doing these acts of the mode of goodness in a devotional way, it does kind of ripple out to everything else in our lives and to the world in general. So I don't have a question per se, because my questions were already answered. Like every point that you said when you were reading the purport and you were like, I'm going to come back to it, those were the ones that I was going to ask you about. So you kind of answered me ahead of time. And I felt very moved by the examples that you gave, and also by the idea that it's so important for us to have the Sangha of devotees to understand these purports and these verses, because if we don't have that greater context, one of the things that I was going to share was that when I first read that verse and I heard it, I think at the 26 Second Avenue, I was like, what is Prabhupada talking about? Like, he doesn't want us to be good people. Like, he doesn't want us to do these things. And when later on, when I'm having to explain these verses to other people, sometimes these same questions would come up. So you hit on each point so beautifully. It's so important to hear from devotees that can give us that context and that can put it into that real world situation, because too much philosophy and not enough heart, I just think it's a really dangerous combination. So thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
That was very, very complimentary. Thank you very much for your encouraging words. I agree with you. David.
Thank you for, as always, a truly enlightening presentation of these complicated matters. I guess to return to the more philosophical piece of it, after Andrea rightfully, I think, called into question that bit, it strikes me that part of it is about intention, or a language of intention might get to the heart of this, in the sense that if you're performing social work as a way of kind of bolstering your ego or sort of currying favor with your community, there's all these kind of selfish motivations that can be subtle ones in good works. And I think the point is, perhaps one aspect of the point rather, is that the devotional intention sort of allows you to do these good works in an actually good way. But without the devotional intention, you can be doing these good works, but with actually a lot of sort of accumulating a lot of karma, because you're doing it for reasons that are at least in part unsavory.
Insightful observation on your part. Yes, thank you. It gets even trickier when you encounter people who are so beautiful and their actions are so unselfish, and their reasons for putting their life on the line, working for Doctors Without Borders or whatever the particular NGO may be, or nonprofit group. You know, we're really obliged to ask ourselves, is that really completely material? You know, if someone is working out of an utterly unselfish motive, whether or not they have belief in God, I mean, you know, let's get right down to it. Is belief in God required in order for an action to be considered worthy? Is it necessary to say, yes, I have some faith in a supreme being, in order for your participation in the distribution of food in a war zone to be meaningful on something other than a nutritional level? Right? And for that matter, which level of realization of God? What if your realization is impersonal? Is it tainted? You know, so, you know, it's a little bit more complicated than it may seem just on its face. Sure, David, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got me thinking, and I guess my question and response is love of all humanity tantamount for love for Krishna? If you truly are a soul who loves everyone and everything, without Ishvara or whatever, without a sort of conception of God, or that's just not part of your consciousness. Maybe you're just indifferent to that sort of relation as that form of the relation. Is it tacitly a form of devotion? Are there forms of devotion that we don't call bhakti yoga, but that are functionally equivalent?
Now we're getting into it. Now we should schedule a whole other session just on this one point. I think we need to bear a few things in mind. One is that it's impossible to love everything. You can admire the sky. You know, you can be in awe of nature. You can thrill to, you know, a Mozart symphony. You know, your heart can be touched by a beautiful painting. But love everything? I don't know. On the other hand, if you've developed a relationship with the source of everything, then in everything you will see a reflection of your beloved, right? Then it's possible. Prabhupada gives the example of a mother seeing her child's shoe, and she starts to cry. You know, why? She's not weeping because she loves the shoe, right? The shoe is a reflection of her love for her child. So, but at the same time, you know, and I do want to be careful about this because it's a very important point. I have met people who have no conception of Krishna consciousness whatsoever. None. but their character moved me to tears. And, I found myself praying that someday I might have an ounce of the compassion that these people feel, for others. It just takes my breath away. Some of the people I've known in my lifetime, as I'm sure each of you has met someone who has really touched your heart, who may not have had neck beads. Right? So part of, I think, the homework assignment here, if you will, is to always keep a careful balance in mind that here's what I can tell you after my 53 years of practice of Krishna consciousness. The universe is a gift of love from God. And it is the place that he has prepared for us where we can learn to love again in return. And if you keep that in mind, then all of these other issues become a little bit less academic and more heartfelt, and that will guide you. These things are tricky, they're complicated. But if you keep that in mind, that we are blessed to be alive in a creation that favors love, the giving and receiving of love, then I think you have a key for unlocking these many different complex questions. Great. How is that, Atma? Is that okay for you? I think you're muted.
Very nice. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Very well. Well, thank you all very much. If there are any last questions? No? Yes, Yugala Priti, Prabhu?
What to do if probably because of the past life, the life before Krishna consciousness, there was something that there is a block, kind of block of that love that you want to experience, to everyone, and it comes to you will experience you want to experience to Krishna, and that's why you could experience to everyone. But there are people that have this love to other people. So how to get to the point of loving, just loving, not specifically who to love.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. Can you phrase it again for me?
The feeling of blockage, that the ability of love, like
Okay.
I don't feel that I'm open, even though the caring is always there. I notice there is a in my personality or habit, I don't know, there is a always desire to do something for somebody, always, but that love, I feel like there is a blockage, like it doesn't.
Yeah. Look, you're not alone, Most of the time you meet people, you don't want to love them, you want to push them down a flight of stairs. I mean, who is this person? What does he want from me? People can be obnoxious, and they can be cruel, and they can be just foolish, and you don't really feel like you want to love them. Why should I love this person? What is lovable about this person? Now we're asking the question. What is lovable about the person is not what you're perceiving. What is lovable is what you cannot perceive.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be coherent about this. That you say we have to love the source, and we have to assume that the source, we know that the source, this isn't a theory of creation, like in Christianity, that God created the world, because I'm not familiar with it in the Krishna consciousness. But we have to really believe in that we have to even love evil. Krishna fought very hard against evil, and his whole purpose was to fight evil. And we have to love evil because he is the one who directs the birth of evil.
Well, wait a minute. Where'd you get the idea that we're supposed to love evil?
We're supposed to love evil people also. We're supposed to be tolerant or compassionate towards the evil, because he is also, evil is also a creation of Krishna.
Well, that
I direct the birth, a person who has children in his head, I direct the birth to an evil womb so that they'll become evil. So even that, we have to have tolerance and compassion. This is what
I hear what you're saying. I think you may be conflating love with insight. Where we are compelled to have insight into the nature of evil. I'm not sure we're compelled to love evil. The purpose of Krishna consciousness is specifically to be able to develop tools for discerning between good and evil, to be able to make the distinction between what is favorable, what is to be pursued, what is to be supported, what is to be promulgated in the world, and what is harmful and to be minimized. There's no such, hallmark, amorphous, generalized greeting card idea that becoming a devotee means you love everything and you love everybody. That's not what I was referring to a moment ago. What I was trying to describe was a situation where if you understand creation as a gift from Krishna, then you'll be excited about participating in that creation, because it is a gift that you're being given, an opportunity to exercise your talents, your skills, your knowledge, your particular passions or vocational abilities in devotion, in a devotional cause. That's different from some kind of... Now, there is a platform from which you love everything. It's called the Uttama Adhikari platform, where you're so advanced, you're so spiritually enlightened that you love everything, including evil. Don't imitate that. You're just going to get into trouble. That's not for us. We are beginners, and where we should be aiming for is the Madhyam Adhikari level. Madhyam Adhikaris make a distinction between good, evil, between those people whom we should associate with and people we should not associate with. It's a place of discernment. That's the kind of character and tools and skill sets that we're meant to be developing, not imitating the Uttama Adhikaris, who are so elevated that they think everybody else is a devotee except me. The worst evil person in the world is more of a devotee than I am. Don't imitate that. That's not where we're going.
And also, isn't Krishna have a dual nature? He has a nature of which is called Prakriti, and also Purusha. Isn't Prakriti kind of an evil nature in sense?
No, Prakriti is not evil. You're talking about not natures but energies. Krishna has different energies. There's a material energy, there's a spiritual energy, there's the marginal energy, which is the living entities. And each of those energies is, if you want to say lovable because they come from God, that's okay. But the material energy, the Prakriti, is a temporary energy. The nature of life is eternal. So we're moving away from the temporary environment of Prakriti and moving into the environment of the Purusha, the realm of the Supreme Being. So I appreciate your point here, because in one sense, yes, everything is lovable because it comes from Krishna. But it doesn't mean that we give the same degree of love to Prakriti, to a provisional and problematic creation, that we give to the eternal spiritual realm. We're still meant to be discerning about that. But thank you. That's very, very good comments. Do we have time for one more, Atma?
Yes, Prabhu.
All right. So one more question or thought or comment from anyone? You know what I like? We started off with 4 people. We got 12 now. If we stayed longer, we'd be up to 20. If we were on the phone here on Zoom for another day or so, who knows how big it would grow.
We have 13. We have 13 because Subi's here with me. You only see me, but she's here.
Oh, Haribol, Subi.
You heard her?
Yeah, no.
Say louder.
Hare Krishna to you. Thank you. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I hope you'll forgive me. It's
Can I ask one? Can I ask one, Prabhu?
of course.
Okay. I can't remember if it was my last comment or second to last, but my seeing Mayor Giuliani. So like I said, I think he's a pretty awful person. But when I saw him, I really liked him because I saw for me, I just thought, oh, you know, he's a spirit soul who's, maybe he's pretty badly in Maya, but I saw a spirit soul there, and I was happy to tell him the holy name. And I was just, I mean, what are your thoughts when you hear it? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm very impressed with how advanced you are in your Krishna consciousness, that when you see a Giuliani, all that you see is the jewel part.
Okay, Subi says she agrees with you, Yogeshwara.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you for your association, your company. I so enjoy this time together with you. And forgive me, I'm late for an assignment, but I wanted to spend this time with you, and I very much appreciate it. So thank you all very much. Haribol, Atma.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol,
Thank you so much for
David.
spending your time with us. If you all like to join me expressing appreciation for Yogeshwara before he goes, now he can do it. Yogeshwara Prabhu ki jai.
Oh.
Hare
Hari bol.